Hey everybody, welcome back to the Storytime channel. My name is Steven, and let's get into our stories of the day. I'm gonna tell the story of how I left my restaurant job. I am a good worker. I show up 5 minutes early to every shift, I stay late when I'm needed, and unlike half my coworkers at the time, I actually did my job. I was a credit to my workplace and the GM knew it. After 3 months working there, I had already gotten $1 an hour raise and a few new uniforms as a treat. GM's words. This is when poop started going south. Apparently, our location was under evaluation to become a trainer location, meaning that we would have a member of the training board making a trip from HQ once a week or more to test the employees on their knowledge and their following of procedure. This lady was a witch. She showed up and immediately took issue with every single thing she saw. Your name tag was slightly tilted or under your apron? You got written up. You didn't have the right color pants on? Right up. Your shoelaces were even the slightest bit loose? Right up. I, luckily, wasn't written up once, but many of my coworkers got more write-ups in that week than they had gotten in their entire time working there. Eventually, she started quizzing people, and if she took issue with anything you said, you were immediately written up and forced to retake the relevant training. This could mean that you got the wrong temps for the chicken or that you stumbled over a word. Now, I may be a good employee, but I say, a lot. It's a very bad habit of mine, but it only comes out when the information I'm looking for is habitual and not conscious. So, stuff about the uniform, I'm game. But if you ask me how long the chicken needs to be steamed for, it might take a few for me to pull that info up, because I know it by pressing the up arrow on the steamer 5 times. My solution? I would just answer in simple terms, no excess language. My goal was to use the minimum amount of speech possible. I was going all Kevin on this witch. How much mayo do you put in 13 pounds of chicken? 5 pounds or 1 gallon tub? What dishes need to be cleaned and available at all times? Baking trays and shredder parts. What color shirt do you wear on Tuesday? Blue. It took me a bit to get the info, but I could and did pull it all out with no which I know she would have taken issue with because she did when Emmanuel did the same. I thought I was in the clear. I thought wrong. I get called over to one of the dining tables halfway through the lunch rush, surrounded by customers, where my GM and the HQ lady were sitting. I sit down across from them. What do you need? General manager says HQ tells me that you were rude to her. I was? HQ says, you responded in such short answers and avoided any conversation with me. I did because I was afraid you would take problem with something I said, and so I limited the things I said. It looks like I was right. GM says regardless, you'll have to sign this form saying that you were rude to HQ. But I wasn't. You were. GM says whether or not you were doesn't matter. You have to sign this to continue working. And if I don't sign it, you don't continue working. Wonderful. I guess this means I quit. The HQ then says this. We'll need your hat and all the pieces of your uniform as well. I stood up, took off my company hat, tossed it on the table, and then took off my restaurant branded shirt and tossed that on the table too. So here I am, a very hairy grown man, standing with my nipples out, ruining the meals of several white women around me. I then take a big stretch to show off my very Pillsbury Doughboy figure and showing off my hairy armpits, and then tell them I'll have the rest of my uniform at the restaurant by the end of the week. I turn and leave the very lazy kitchen staff to pick up the slack during the middle of lunch rush. Basically, they finally had to do their jobs. But that's not it. I get a call from the GM the next day where she asks me if I knew that the HQ was trying to bluff me. I responded with, I don't want to work in a place where an HQ feels the need to bluff their employees. The assistant GM gave me a glowing review, and I had an easier and better paying job before I even dropped off my shirts at the end of the week. That's pretty courageous. You're in a situation where you know they're trying to hang you dry, and you stand up to it, which includes losing your job. If this was you, would you have done the same thing or would you have done things a little bit differently? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Can't stay past my clock out time? No problem. This is a story from about 6 years ago, back when I worked as a waitress. All names are fake for the purpose of privacy. The summer between grade 11 and 12, I worked at a small family-owned restaurant about a 20-minute drive from my house. I lived fairly middle of nowhere, so this restaurant and 2 others basically served the whole county. So even during the dead time of winter, we were often busy. But we were also directly on a path from a big city to a large lake, so we're especially busy in summer. The people that ran the restaurant were a married couple. The wife, Sandra, was generally lovely, but the husband, Marvin, had a very short temper. I think I can count the number of times he talked to me without yelling on one hand. I picked up on the job easily enough. I'm very extroverted and friendly, so a lot of the customers loved me. Sandra decided to train me to do the opening shift at the restaurant. She would stay in the back and help me with prep and other things as I got used to the setting. Marvin was against this from the onset, saying I wasn't there long enough to be taking on this commitment. This malicious compliance took place about midway through June. After 2 weeks with Sandra helping me out, she stops coming by. So I was there with a singular cook until lunch, when I got relieved by another staff member. It just so happens that the next few weeks were going to be gorgeous weather, so my first week without Sandra, we get slammed. The waitress that relieves me, Bonnie, is my senior. So as Sandra and Marvin have told me, Bonnie can ask me to stay to help out, and it's like them asking me to stay. Bonnie asks me to stay and help out every day that week. Marvin sees my time clocked in and out and freaks out, saying he knew I wasn't trained enough and that I was using that excuse to get more hours, even though I was getting 25 plus every week and had a second job. I knew better than to say anything back, and then he told me I wasn't allowed to stay past my time anymore. I confirmed with him that, no matter what, I shouldn't stay past my time. He yells that unless him or Sandra specifically tell me to stay, I can't stay past my time. I smile and tell him no problem. So I'm opening all of next week, and like the week before, we are slammed. It looks like there's going to be no reprieve as my time to clock out comes. I tell Bonnie I'm leaving, and like usual, she asks me to stay. I shrug and said Marvin told me explicitly I couldn't take her word for asking me to stay. Bonnie is pissed. She agrees that I can leave, and she phones Sandra and Marvin. Sandra phones me and asks me if I can come back, but I'm already home at this point and I refuse. So her and Marvin have to leave their house to go help out. I come into work the next morning to open, and both Sandra and Marvin are there. Marvin starts yelling at me about how I just left when it was so busy. And I calmly remind him I was told to leave unless him or Sandra specifically requested it. He's grumpy and says I should know what he meant. So I ask if I can take the relieving waitstaff's word for asking me to stay. He disagrees, and instead I have to phone him before I leave. Sandra starts arguing with him, saying that's ridiculous and to just let us make the judgment call as we're the ones out there and know what's happening. But Marvin is sticking to his guns, and Sandra just rolls her eyes and walks away. So obviously, here comes malicious compliance part 2. I phone him at the end of every one of my shifts, even when I have to close or it's dead. I always said I just wanted to be sure this time, since he was so upset last time. This lasts for a little over a week before he finally gives up and says, it's fine if I or another waitstaff make a judgment call to stay past the time if it's busy. Guy obviously had some anger issues and that clouded his judgment. He wanted to be able to get so justifiably angry over anything, even though it was very well explained why the situations were happening the way they were. Why you shouldn't tell a child to do something you don't actually want them to do. I don't know why I haven't thought about this until just now. So I was probably like 8 years old when both of these stories happened, but I darn sure did this intentionally on both occasions. Yes, both occasions. My dad didn't learn the first time. The first time it happened, we were on our way home from a road trip, and I've never had an easy time in public bathrooms. No matter how hard I try, I just can't go. We were maybe another 10 to 15 minutes away from our house, but my dad decided that getting cigarettes was more important than anything else at the moment. He took maybe 10 minutes inside the store, and then maybe a minute into the drive home, we hit a very long red light. I was crying because I had to pee really bad, and I guess all that my dad had on his brain was being upset because he couldn't smoke in the car because we started arguing. And the next thing he did was tell me, "God darn it, OP, just piss yourself and stop whining." Why he thought saying that was a good idea, I will never know. But I listened. I peed myself and stopped whining like he asked. And like most parents are concerned by, child had stopped complaining altogether. He stared at me in the mirror in horror. "Are you peeing?" he goes, and I just said no, but I was. And then he threw out my booster seat when we got home. And the second time, a week after last time, I fought insomnia for most of my life. Just so you understand the setting. My dad was chasing me around the house around 10 p.m. due to it being an hour after my bedtime. The last time he put me to bed, he was screaming and I was crying. He grabbed me, shook me, and told me to not get my butt out of bed for anything. Anything? Anything. Not even to go to the bathroom? Pee yourself. Of course, it's not like he didn't do it last time. Well, I made eye contact with him and pissed myself like he said. And he slowly realized that now I cannot go to bed until my sheets are cleaned. He hung his head, sighed, and said, "You win, get up." That's my story of malicious compliance. Edit: no, my dad is not abusive. No, the yelling did not scare me. No, the shaking did not hurt me. I have a great relationship with my dad, including matching tattoos and him being the only person I turn to when going through my problems. Both times I was being a little poop for the sake of making him understand to not tell me to do something if he didn't want me to do it. Both incidents we laughed afterwards, and he apologized both times for yelling and that he was just frustrated. I struggled with insomnia, so putting me to bed was like pulling teeth. No, he is not a tick. No, he isn't abusive. It was just meant to be lighthearted and funny. I'm glad that they cleared it up that it was lighthearted and funny, and OP was just keeping their father more respectable and honest. Don't tell them to do something you don't actually want them to do. It's pretty simple. My section sergeant was a tick to me, and it came back to bite him in the butt. I was a sergeant in the army and was part of a unit that was about to have a big ceremony to change what patch we wore on our uniform sleeves. During our first formation of the day, my boss made a big deal about how Sergeant OP is flagged for dental, meaning there is some dental thing that I'm overdue or will be overdue in the near future. Now, this was the first time he had said anything to me, and I wasn't past due on anything. I was just coming up on my annual cleaning or something. Instead of just mentioning it to me one-on-one, he decided to make a big deal about it in front of our entire section and demanded that I leave right then to go take care of it. Not one to argue with a senior NCO, I took off to the dental clinic a short drive away with no appointment. I knew that we had a ceremony that afternoon for our new uniform patch, and I had no desire to participate if I could avoid it. The ceremony was going to involve several hours of us standing in formation, practicing to stand in formation. Lots of people reading speeches while we stood in formation, and then everybody would remove the old Velcro patch and put on the new patch. Yay! Well, it took a while to get in for an exam at the dentist, and by the time I was laying in the exam room, my phone started buzzing regularly with texts from my boss asking where I was. These messages were getting angrier and angrier as they were practicing for the ceremony, and his boss wanted everyone there for it. I eventually messaged him back that I was still at the dentist and that I would head over as soon as they were finished clearing me. Bad news. The dentist said that I needed a couple of fillings and would have to schedule an appointment. I asked her if there was any way they could do them today if I was prepared to wait, and she said yes. Several hours later, I called my boss from the dentist's office to let him know I was finished. He was livid that I had missed the entire ceremony, and he demanded that I bring a document with me outlining everything the dentist had to do and why. I told the dentist this. Keep in mind, she is also in the army and outranks my boss by an order of magnitude. and she was pissed that he would ask for my personal medical information like that. Instead, she took one of the pre-printed notes that they give children as an excuse for missing school and crossed out the student and wrote Sergeant along with my name and the date. I made sure to hand the note to him in front of our section and reminded him that I went on the day of the ceremony because he ordered me to. In the comments, OP said the note read something like, "Your crossed out student, Sergeant OP, had an appointment today at the Army Dental Clinic. Please excuse their absence," with a big cartoon tooth in the corner. It's kind of funny that OP got to make their boss look like an absolute fool, handing him this tardy slip with a cartoon tooth on it. But with that being said, that's all the stories we have for today. So what I want to know is, which of these stories was your personal favorite of the day and why? Let me know which story and why in the comments section down below. And thank you all so very much for watching and listening to the Storytime channel today. If you haven't yet, please consider subscribing and don't forget to turn notifications on so you'll never miss an upcoming video from the Storytime channel. Thank you all again so very much for watching and listening to the Storytime channel.